Lady in the third row there.
Hi, my name is Nazir Shabdeen. I'm from Pakistan. I'd like to address my question to those speaking for the motion. How do you explain the deaths of a tribal elder in Afghanistan who is killed because his associations with liberal parties are revealed because of WikiLeaks?
Sir Richard Dalton.
That would be appalling if it happened. My case rests on the fact that the balance of WikiLeaks' account is a good one. I do not support everything that they have done. Some things that they have done have been wrong, but overall, looking at this particular motion, I do believe that the world is better off with WikiLeaks. That doesn't mean to say that some dreadful things will not happen as a result of WikiLeaks. But remember where we started, which was with the statements by both Khan and myself about the significance of the Iraq and Afghanistan war logs in educating our peoples, both those who have suffered and those who've inflicted the suffering, about the scale of civilian casualties attendant on military operations.
Okay, I'm going to take a question from the woman behind. Yes, you, please.
I'm from Qatar. You've been talking about diplomacy this whole time, and, well, first of all, I'd just like to point out the United States is all about freedom of speech and freedom of press and being truthful, and people should have the right to speak out and say whatever they want. However, with all the wars that are being fought today, such as the war in Iraq, you cannot possibly say that without WikiLeaks or something that would show the people the truth, that these people would not be harmed. I mean, more people are dying because they're not finding out the truth about the reasoning behind these wars that are happening. So you're saying that the United States has been spying on UN officials. I think that that's something that the people should deserve to know.
Scott Gilmore, you're nodding in agreement.
I didn't say that. and I think that, that spying is something that espionage is an illegal activity by every country. Every country does it. But the State Department is not an intelligence organization. They don't spy. They're not involved in espionage.
It was the State Department cable, though. It was the State Department cable from Washington to the US mission at the UN. You worked, what was your title, Director of Intelligence in the State Department. Are you saying you did not know that the US was spying on the UN?
Correct.
Well, that's extraordinary.
But I agree with what you're saying.
Perhaps you need WikiLeaks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not at the cost of the security of the American people. And I think that this will.
The security of the American people is damaged by the revelation that U.S. diplomats have been told to spy.
Why don't we let Americans decide that?
Yeah. Sure.
Well, we could let Secretary of Defense Robert Gates, who said that the revelations were awkward and embarrassing, but the consequences for U.S. foreign policy he described as fairly modest.
Agree. But the problem is,
it's not you facing.
No. I'm saying that the information itself
Scott Gilmore said it was
is not so damaging.
The information,
it's the process that's been impacted. The fact is that people will not share information. People will tighten up their security procedures. They will not be as open. They will not be as transparent, and that's going to hurt everybody.
Then why is the State Department saying to Congress that there has been little long-term damage to U.S. interests, if what you're saying is true?
Because they're talking about the actual information that was included in the leaks. That information, I think all of us agree, there is not very much there. There's some embarrassing things, but there's certainly not a whole lot of information that people didn't already know. Some of it's interesting.
I'm going to go to the next question. The gentleman in the second row there, please.
Hi, I'm Khalid. I'm from Qatar. We must question who are governments protecting from the truth, themselves, their reputation, or the people. I would agree that this is for their own public reputation.
Insidious irony of WikiLeaks is they're not focusing on the governments most lying. They're focusing on the governments that are the most open, the most transparent, the most accountable. They're harming not only innocent people, but innocent institutions.
Well, being wrong is not a lie. Some people make mistakes. They sincerely believe things, but they're wrong. They don't have the right information, or they simply, their experiences, their cognitive worldview is off kilter with people, and they make mistakes. They do bad things.
And absolute truth, absolute transparency is something that nobody in this room actually believes in. You know, I don't like the suit Karn bought today. But I'm not going to tell him that because it's going to hurt his feelings.
You just did.
Count Ross, you wanted a quick word on this?
I think it's a very interesting question. I mean, I think the ultimate ideal is actually transparency. I mean, not of every detail, not of every kind of personal message between people, but actually full transparency would make the world a better place.
But would Sir Richard have left Iran and British-Iranian relations better if on his last day he had sent a package to the foreign minister in Tehran with all of his cables?
I think you're making a false case, because I think to talk about it in individual episodes in the current dispensation would undoubtedly be disruptive and
that's what we've been doing all night.
Even harmful. But actually the goal here is a much greater culture of transparency. Clearly, that's my hope of what WikiLeaks will produce, and why I support the motion, is that it will actually force governments to be more transparent,
but it'll force
they will be vulnerable. And I agree with you too that every government should be vulnerable to WikiLeaks. And I think WikiLeaks is in fact the greatest threat to the most repressive governments. Interestingly, in a debate I took part in the other day, it was a Chinese academic who said this. WikiLeaks is the greatest threat to oppressive governments. And I think WikiLeaks says a worse story about...
WikiLeaks is a theoretical threat to the Chinese government.
Let me finish for a second. WikiLeaks tells a worse story about many of the governments that the US is talking to than it says about the US itself.
Okay, I'm going to move on. Lady in the second row. Yes, you.
Good evening, everyone. You want to change diplomacies, you want a new system, but you want a new system that will start with something wrong, with a leak, with the stolen information. What good base is that?
If the United States representatives can assure those contacts that, yes, the State Department and the Defense Department are not going to collude to take no care of official secrets in their possession, which is in effect what they did through the extensive Defense Department network, which allegedly Mr. Manning had access to. If the US representatives can assure their contacts that secrets are going to be kept, as they do have to be kept in certain negotiations, for example, then I believe that we will see the WikiLeaks episode with respect to the diplomatic system as a very embarrassing episode rather than as a fundamental change. So, yes to more transparency, yes to citizens being more eager to demand explanations from their governments. Why, for example, has the member states of the GCC adopted such a different position in public to the one they've adopted in private about their relationships with Iran? The citizens of GCC member states should be asking their representatives that. So maybe for the sake of a quiet life, to go back to one speaker, individuals don't want to get involved, but those individuals and those families and those tribes, those communities have representatives, and those representatives are already involved in the public affairs of your country.
Is there always going to be a need for WikiLeaks, in your view?
I beg your pardon?
Is there always going to be a need for WikiLeaks, in your view?
WikiLeaks will provide a service, as will other newspapers.
To keep governments honest? To look over their shoulder?
To keep governments honest,
And who keeps WikiLeaks honest? This is the fundamental difference. I mean, we were agreeing with what you're saying, that we need more accountability.
This is a kind of the comparison that comes up over and over again. I mean,
Karen, I've given you a chance, and you have to let me go uninterrupted here. I agree with you.
Yes, let Scott Gilmore.
I agree with you that we all want a more open government. We want more accountability. But WikiLeaks is not going to do that for us. WikiLeaks, ironically, is giving us less accountability. It's causing governments to become more closed and more secret, and it's giving the right to decide what should or should not be a secret to an unaccountable NGO or to the night editors of a Spanish newspaper.
They're apples and oranges, Scott. They're completely different things. Governments wage war. They kill people. They employ people
WikiLeaks is going to end up killing people with the release of this material.
WikiLeaks doesn't wage war. I think different standards of accountability and transparency apply to them. I rather agree that they need themselves to be much more transparent.
Sir Richard made this argument earlier.
But it's a fundamentally different moral order than keeping governments transparent.
Sir Richard made this argument earlier, and ironically it's an argument you hear in the United States with the National Rifle Association. What you're saying is that WikiLeaks doesn't kill people. It's people like Manning or the information that's killing people. But in fact, just like NRA says, it's not guns that kill people, it's people that kill people. WikiLeaks is a weapon. It's also the cause of the damage that's being done.
Just for the record, we have no evidence that anybody has been killed as a result of a WikiLeaks disclosure.
The people that are going to be harmed and that are going to die of this, we're never going to read about it. It's not going to be in WikiLeaks. The Guardian's not going to write about it. It's going to happen in a little village in Sudan It's going to happen in somewhere in North Korea.
I think the press is all over this, particularly in the US, and quite rightly. I mean, people are looking for these examples where it can be proven that WikiLeaks has caused harm, but we do know that governments have caused harm.
Okay, I'm going to move on to a final question. Gentleman in the third row. Yes, you, please.
I'm Dawood Al-Anwari. My question is to Mr. Carl Ford and Scott Gilmore. If you found out that 9/11 and the economic crisis and the whole big event that happened in this world was done by the US government, and WikiLeaks showed you that, would you still be against WikiLeaks?
Yes.
We would be for
whistleblowing. We would be for whistleblowing.
For whistleblowing, but against WikiLeaks.
Yeah.
Would you rather live in a lie instead of knowing the truth?
Of course not. I mean, the idea that governments can't keep anything private is an assumption that I don't think any government in the world accept as practical. It would be great if every citizen in the United States knew everything that everybody else knew. But most of us recognize that we couldn't get anything done. We couldn't make our government function if everybody was putting their 2 cents first.
But that's a pretty big anything, isn't it, that he's talking about?
People died from this, and you said, like, you don't want to know the truth?
Well, but I knew the truth about Iraq. I think that we told the truth as we believed it at the time to the American people. Now, there are other people that don't think that, or the other governments may have done differently. But we weren't making up stuff to convince people to go to war. The fact is that our bad work made that point. But it wasn't done on purpose. It wasn't done because we were trying to fool the American people.
Did you saw the video that's been uploaded by WikiLeaks, the video that happened in Iraq? Will you still say you don't want to know the truth?
Listen, I'll take your hypothetical a step further. If the release of WikiLeaks
that wasn't hypothetical. He was talking about the helicopter.
No, but his original
very
question
specific
was a
2007 incident.
Yeah. There are big events that happen in this world, and you only know one side of the story.
Absolutely. And what this side is
way.
arguing is that we need more accountability, we need more transparency, we need whistleblowing. But WikiLeaks is not the tool to do that. It is a weapon of mass destruction in its own. It is damaging the democratic system and the diplomatic system at the cost of a great deal.
Sir Richard Dalton, you're shaking your head there.
Well, because I haven't succeeded in persuading them that actually, according to the State Department, the system is going to continue more or less as it was in protecting United States interests.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was one statement by the State Department and one statement by the Defense Secretary, who frankly are going to want to try to limit the expectations and reduce the expectation of damage considerably. But in my personal conversations with acting diplomats, both British and American right now, they are quite frank about saying it has hurt them and it has damaged them.
Okay, I'm sorry, you wanted to make one further point.
I just want to say last thing, like, I'd rather live in a life or a world that will tell me the truth instead of just closing my eyes and just believing what people tell me.
Bravo, bravo.
Okay, in the little time we have left, I'm going to ask each of you just for a very, very brief 10-second summary. Sir Richard Dalton.
It's in the interest of all of us, of citizens, to know more about what is done in our names. So please support this motion.
Carlos.
I think this is ultimately a battle between truth and control, and I think the crisis that we find ourselves, particularly here in the Middle East, but also globally, demands that we take back the truth.
Scott Gilmore.
This isn't a debate about Iraq, and we all agree we need more openness and transparency. But you should oppose this motion because WikiLeaks is not the road to give us that transparency.
Carl Ford, very brief.
I think that all of us should be for transparency and that we should hold our governments to account to tell us the truth. But WikiLeaks has harmed that process rather than helped it. American people are going to know less after this than they would have if WikiLeaks hadn't done its thing.
Okay, thank you. We are now at the point where we're going to vote on the motion that this House believes the world is better off with WikiLeaks. Let me just explain to you before you do vote. If you want to vote for the motion, that is the side represented by those on my right, you press button 1, the yes button. If you want to vote against the motion, the side represented by those on my left, it's button 2, the no button. Whichever button you do want to press, please do it now. All right, there's the result. 74% for the motion, 26% against. The motion has been resoundingly carried. All it remains for me to do is to thank our distinguished speakers. Thank you very much indeed for coming here tonight. Thank you to you, the audience, for your questions. The Doha Debates will be back again in a few weeks' time. Till then, from all of us, have a safe journey home. Good night. Thank you. Good night.